Hello, comrades, and welcome to this first video on the Chinese Revolution Area of Study 1. In this video, we'll be looking at Sun Yixian and the 1911 Xinhai Revolution. Now, our studies don't officially start until 1912, when the Republic of China is established, but this is important contextualization of Area of Study 1. And Sun Yixian is a key knowledge point on the study design. So this is a quote from Sun Yixian. He says, "Only when imperialism is eliminated can there be peace for mankind. To achieve this goal, we should first rejuvenate Chinese nationalism and restore China's position as a sovereign state." Now, just for a bit of context, China had been governed by the Qing dynasty, who came. So the emperor came from Manchuria, which was a separate sort of national identity to Han Chinese. And so when he talks about rejuvenating Chinese nationalism, he's referring to rejuvenate pride in Han China, not Manchuria. So that's a good quote to give you a sense of where Sun Yixian is at in terms of his feeling towards the empire. So in this video, we'll be dealing with 4 key knowledge points. Sun Yixian, a very significant individual. His philosophy, Sun Yixian's 3 principles of the people. Yuan Shikai, who's another key knowledge point on the study design, a key individual, as well as challenges to the early Republican era. Now, our next video will actually focus more on Yuan Shikai and the challenges to the early Republican era, but in this video, we'll just be introduced to that. So let's start by looking at Sun Yixian, pictured here. So Sun Yixian, born 1866 and died in 1925, was an important early 20th century political leader, writer, and philosopher. So significant was Sun's contribution in the early stages of the revolution that many consider him the father of modern China. And he is celebrated in Taiwan, where the nationalists ended up residing, as well as in mainland China. So both nationalists and communists, they all see him as the father of modern China, the leader of the initial revolution. So let's start by looking at Sun's views. Sun Yixian had briefly lived in the USA and seen the virtues of modern democratic government. He actually completed his schooling in Hawaii and later traveled around the USA, UK, and other Western countries. He was angered by China's domination at the hands of foreign powers, particularly Japan had a stronghold in China, and many European nations also had concessions in China and had been essentially they'd essentially been controlling areas of China, and China had Sun saw it that China was being manipulated by all these foreign powers. He was also angered by the corruption of the Qing dynasty, which I won't get into right now, but the Qing were seen as quite corrupt, and particularly the Empress Dowager Cixi, who isn't a key knowledge point in the study design, but was the regent of Puyi, the last emperor. And so Sun formed the Revived China Society in 1894. This was a revolutionary group, Sun's first revolutionary group of a few. And so this is sort of the beginning of Sun's revolutionary ways. For Sun Yixian, the imperial system was outdated and must be overthrown. Modernization was only possible if China adopted progressive Western-style political and economic institutions, and China could not progress unless it became a republic. Sun developed his own revolutionary philosophy known as the 3 principles of the people. And this is a key knowledge point that's really important to remember because the 3 principles of the people were sort of formed the basis of the revolution for both the nationalists and the communists. So let's have a look at these 3 principles of the people. This was Sun Yixian's philosophy on what a Chinese republic would look like once the Qing dynasty had been overthrown. The three principles were nationalism, democracy, and people's livelihoods. So in terms of nationalism, he felt that domination of foreign powers in China must come to an end, and the Manchu, being the Qing dynasty from Manchuria, must be ousted. He believed that Han Chinese should rule themselves, and Han Chinese, you may remember this from year 7 even, year 7 humanities. The Han dynasty came after the Qin dynasty, the Qin dynasty being the first emperor, and the Han made a huge amount of progress in China. That's when all these incredible Chinese inventions were created, and there was a huge amount of progress. And so mainland China, or the majority of sort of the center of China, were known as Han Chinese. And here's an anti-Qing slogan that sort of highlights Sun's idea of nationalism. It says, "China is the China of the Chinese." In terms of democracy, Sun called for a republic with a popularly elected president and parliament, similar to the system in the UK, similar to Australia even, except with a president, not a prime minister. He wanted a judicial, legislative, and executive branch. Judicial and responsible for the laws, judicial responsible for the courts, legislative responsible for laws, and executive being the sort of heads of government that carries out those laws. But he knew that it would be hard to immediately launch into a political system with a president and parliament after thousands of years of being an empire. And so he believed that this democratic republic needed to be phased in. He believed that there should be 3 years with a military dictatorship to maintain control of the republic and defend the revolution. After that, he believed there needed to be a 6-year tutelage period to explain and trial democracy to see how it would work in China. And then after those 9 years were up, 3 years military dictatorship, 6 years tutelage period, the military government would be disbanded, the constitution would be written, and elections would be held for the first president. This aspect will become significant when we look at Yuan Shikai. And then the final principle of the people is people's livelihood. He believed there needed to be more regulated ownership of agricultural land, strong state ownership in industry, so aspects of socialism, and a fairer tax system. Sun once described this principle of people's livelihoods as socialism, it is communism, it is utopianism. Tongmenghui. So in September 1905, Sun brought together a coalition of different revolutionary groups into the revolutionary alliance known as the Tongmenghui. So this is expanding on the revived China Society. The Tongmenghui's newspaper, the People's Paper, was smuggled into China, where it was eagerly read, particularly by students. And students will be a key revolutionary group throughout your studies of the Chinese Revolution. By 1906, the Tongmenghui had 10,000 members. 5 failed uprisings were staged, and while the Tongmenghui did not play a direct role in bringing down the Manchu dynasty in 1911, their efforts in encouraging anti-Qing feeling was significant. Here's a quote from historian Edwin Moyes. He said, "The final collapse of the Qing dynasty was to a considerable extent inspired by a revolutionary named Sun Yat-sen." I should note here, you will find, as we study China, that there will be 2 names given for different key figures. They're to do with pronunciation, I'm not entirely sure. So Sun Yixian is Sun Yat-sen, and you'll see that there are other spellings for other names. Sorry, someone just popped into the office and I just had to point them in the right direction. So Sun Yixian's later years. Sun's ideas were cited by the rebels that brought down the Qing as the inspiration for their actions. Sun Yixian served briefly as provisional president, but stepped down in favor of Yuan Shikai. Now, this is significant because he felt that Yuan Shikai would be able to be that military dictator that was needed in those first 3 years of the Republic. Sun was Minister of Railways in Yuan's government. He was exiled after Yuan revealed that he was not committed to democratic principles. And Sun's political party, the Kuomintang or GMD or the Nationalists, were increasingly repressed by Yuan Shikai. Sun returned to China during the warlord period after Yuan Shikai's death in 1916, and Sun Yixian's Kuomintang accepted a united front alliance with the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, in 1922. This is all stuff that we're going to learn about in much more detail. This is just a brief overview of Sun Yixian's later years. And so once that united front was formed, plans were made for a military expedition to unite China under a republican government and to defeat the warlords. Sun died from cancer on the 12th of March, 1925, aged only 58. So I've talked briefly about the Xinhai Revolution, but let's have a look at it in more detail. So by 1911, political mismanagement, domestic rebellion, continued humiliation at the hands of foreign powers had discredited the Qing dynasty. On the 10th of October, 1911, so double 10, 10-10, 1911, a bomb being assembled by army officers unintentionally exploded in Wuhan. An investigation was underway by Qing authorities, which unveiled a planned uprising by the soldiers against the Qing. The soldiers decided to bring their plans forward, and within 6 weeks, 15 of China's 24 provinces had declared their independence from Qing rule. Sun Yixian returned to China from the US, and on the 29th of December, a provisional government of the Republic of China was proclaimed at Nanjing. Sun became China's provisional president on the 1st of January 1912, but this wouldn't last long. So here is Yuan Shikai. The Qing still remained in power in Beijing. Yuan was a general from northern China who was not trusted by Puyi's regent. And in January 1909, he was fired from his post as general. However, in late 1911, he was recalled to head the military campaign against the revolution. He was appointed commander-in-chief, but Yuan also negotiated with the revolutionaries. He'd been hard done by Puyi's government, and so he was sort of playing both sides. He was commander-in-chief of the emperor's forces, but also was negotiating with the revolutionaries. And he was negotiating because he wanted to be president of the new government. Sun Yixian agreed to stand down as president on the condition that Yuan secured the abdication of Puyi, China's last emperor. Puyi, I should note, was only 6 years old at this point. The Manchu regime passed on its mandate of heaven, a concept that you will have learnt about back in Year 7 Humanities, the idea that through natural disasters, uprisings, things like that, the mandate of heaven, the belief that you are ordained to rule is passed on. And so that means that when the mandate of heaven is up because of all of these terrible things that take place, then that dynasty passes on to the next dynasty. That's a very simplified version of the mandate of heaven. But the Manchu regime passed on its mandate of heaven, and Puyi abdicated on the 12th of February 1912. General Yuan Shikai was sworn in as the new president of the Republic of China on the 10th of March 1912. So look, that brings us to the end of this video. You'll learn far more about Yuan Shikai and his time as president in our next video. I hope you found this video sort of contextualizing our studies interesting and useful, and I will see you next time.